protesters broke through the police barricade. They were also taken down by authorities. We're told that about 70 to 80 students or protesters more generally were arrested.
Today's a day that ends in Y, so another college campus is descending into chaos. We're going to break down the latest left-wing takeover at Columbia University, plus a free speech scandal in New York City, more woke absurdity in Canada, and so much more on today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across our politics, our media, and the internet, all from an independent perspective. Up first, like I mentioned, we got to check in on Columbia University, the elite and once reputable institution of higher education and supposedly of learning in New York that has been consumed by radicalism and taken over by student protests, particularly anti-Israel protests over the last several years. And the protesters have struck again, once again causing chaos on the campus with another building takeover, but it's playing out quite differently this time around. Take a listen to this first clip from News Nation.
Dozens of pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia University are under arrest after taking over a school library on Wednesday. Some even defacing shelves and displays with slogans like "Columbia will burn" and "Learn from Palestine." At least 80 people were arrested, according to the NYPD. And that protest, by the way, coming just hours after a congressional hearing on anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Ironic timing there, to be sure, but kind of wild to want your own university, at least many of these people are students, some might be outside agitators, to burn. And how exactly that would help Palestine is kind of beyond me. But look, I also have to point out there's just always something ominous to me when these people all cover their faces with masks and with head coverings. And it's like, what are you trying to do that you're so worried your face will be caught on camera? It's a little ominous for sure. And I will always support people's free speech, whether they're pro-Israel, whether they're anti-Israel, whether they're extreme, whether they're moderate, doesn't matter to me. Free speech is free speech. Taking over a building, though, and disrupting the peace and quiet of a library where people are trying to study for their finals is not free speech. It is criminal trespass and absolutely a violation of university policies. So, as far as I'm concerned, they deserved to be arrested. But there's more to this story.
Well, the sun is up now. We're starting to see students trickle onto campus. And right now, things are calm. A stark contrast, of course, from what we saw just hours ago last night. That was really reminiscent of those protests that we saw last year here at Columbia University. In terms of last night, what happened here, we know about 100 protesters occupied a Butler Library in what student protest group Columbia University Apartheid Divest called an emergency rally. Now, the takeover forced students who were studying for final exams to leave the library. Members of the Columbia University community are calling this situation an embarrassment.
As someone whose finals were disrupted last year around this exact time, I think it's actually unfortunate and almost a disgrace to the university, to an elite institution, to not be able to put it under control after a year.
Yeah, I agree. It is an absolute embarrassment and a farce. And it's just like, you're not helping anything. You're not going to make people support your cause more by being obnoxious and unhinged like this and causing chaos in their lives. If anything, if I was a student who was somewhat neutral on this issue, I'd be like, oh, whatever side those people are on is probably crazy because they seem deranged. So not helping your cause, just disrupting your community and harming your fellow students and getting yourself potentially in trouble. Now, the point here is that the reason I think this is still happening is because when it first started last year, or even I think longer than that ago at this point, many universities were very soft on these protesters. But that's not quite how it's playing out this time. Meaning, hopefully, some of them have learned their lesson.
Yeah, so Columbia says that these protesters were asked to show identification. They were also then warned that they could be arrested if they did not. And instead, protesters tried to push past campus security. The university requested then that the NYPD come in and help secure the building, and believe that actually some of the protesters are actually not affiliated with the university. However, Columbia says that the students who did break university rules, they are going to face disciplinary actions. Demonstrations eventually moved to the streets where protesters and police, as you can see on this video, can be seen having a standoff. And then protesters broke through the police barricade. They were also taken down by authorities. We're told that about 70 to 80 students or protesters more generally were arrested. And in fact, two public safety officers with the university, Markey, they were also injured.
So I'm happy that these people got arrested, because you have the right to express yourself, you have the right to free speech, you don't have the right to do this, and you especially don't have the right to do it and then refuse to leave when you're asked. They were given opportunities to defuse the situation, and you don't have the right to resist and fight cops and all that. So obviously I don't want anyone hurt, but to some extent, if you push through police barricades and get roughed up, I'm not going to be breaking out the tiny violin for you. I'm not. But there's a lot more to this fallout that we're going to get into after this. The trans debate is getting insane.
My pronouns aren't preferred, they are mandatory.
The only way to figure out what's actually going on is with Ground News, an amazing service that I've used for years and used to prepare this show. Ground News gathers news from all across the world in one place, so you can see what both sides are saying and make up your own mind. It also shows you everything you need to know about a source's ownership, bias, and factuality. Take the recent UK Supreme Court decision, for example. Using Ground News, you can see how outlets on the left are spinning it. The Independent wrote, "Supreme Court ruling, just the latest curb on trans rights worldwide." Plus, you can see how right-wing media is covering the story. The Daily Wire wrote, "UK Supreme Court rules trans-identifying men are not women." That's quite the difference. Using Ground News, you can get a neutral summary of every story, see how both sides are framing it, see who's covering the story at all and who isn't, and most importantly, use your critical thinking skills to make up your mind for yourself. You can get the same plan that I use, which is the Vantage subscription, if you sign up through my link, ground.news/Brad, or scan the QR code on screen. Get 40% off unlimited access, which comes out to about $5 a month. This exclusive discount is available now through this link, so act now to break your media bubble and keep your critical thinking skills sharp. So it's really interesting to see how this protest and this disruption is playing out in a very, very different manner than a year or two ago when this all began, because there's been a lot of pressure from the Trump administration, from Republicans in Congress, to get these college campuses, which receive tons of federal funding, get their act together and in order. And some of that pressure goes too far in terms of, in my view, trying to coerce them into prohibiting certain beliefs or ideologies. But when the pressure is simply like, don't allow crimes committed on your campus, punish students who blatantly violate your rules and actually disrupt your campus and harm other students, yeah, that's appropriate. And it apparently seems to be working, because take a listen to this message from the new Columbia president. It's unflinching.
What happened today, what I witnessed, was utterly unacceptable. I arrived to see one of our public safety officers wheeled out on a gurney and another getting bandaged. As I left hours later, I walked through the reading room, one of the many jewels of Butler Library, and I saw it defaced and damaged in disturbing ways and with disturbing slogans. Violence and vandalism, hijacking a library, none of that has any place on our campus. These aren't Columbia's values. Columbia unequivocally rejects anti-Semitism and all other forms of harassment and discrimination. I also made sure to be present when the police arrived. I wanted to see for myself how the operation would unfold, and I'm grateful that it was orderly, professional, and extremely limited, with a focus on the students who refused to leave the reading room. I am particularly heartbroken and incensed that this disruption occurred when our students are intensely focused on critical academic work. At a moment when our community deserves calm, the opportunity to study, reflect, complete the academic year successfully, these actions created unnecessary stress and danger.
Yeah, that all seems obviously true to me. And it's nice to see the Columbia administration actually taking a hardline stance on this and is planning on holding these people accountable. And I think it's notable that this president, who, let's be so for real, is not some right-wing Republican, observed the police interactions and thought it was professional and orderly and they just did their job. So I've already seen some left-wing commentator types kind of crying victim, crying police brutality and the like, but it doesn't really sound to me like there was any of that occurred. And again, you don't have the right to take over buildings. This group behind this all, their plan was to create a liberated zone, rename this library, and occupy it. That's not allowed, babe. That's illegal. That's against the rules. That's not free speech. That's not your First Amendment right. That's you seizing property that doesn't belong to you and trying to repurpose it in pursuit of some agenda while violating the rights of your fellow students and community members. Again, illegal, annoying, also, like, can we just be so for real? This is not a good way to convince people over to your side and just not something that should be tolerated. It's interesting. I've talked a little bit about the Trump administration canceling student visas and going after people on green cards for their speech and all of that. And I strongly object to that when it's simply a matter of they said things or they wrote op-eds in that one case from Tufts University. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in weaponizing immigration policy to censor speech or ideas. But if you're actually on here on a student visa and you engage in this kind of criminal act, these are the people whose visas should be revoked and who should be deported. To me, it's just obvious. You don't get to come here and break our laws. And look, I think the Israel-Palestine historical conflict is incredibly complex, and I understand how people feel so strongly on either side, but these particular anti-Israel radicals are just beyond the pale. Here are their statements from Twitter. As long as Columbia University bolsters the violence of empire, we will disrupt your peace and shatter your notions of control. If you escalate repression, we will escalate our disruption on this campus. Today, we refuse the name Butler Library. Nicholas Murray Butler was a fascist who expelled student strikers and dined with Nazis. The library is a symbol of an imperial university that hoards knowledge and uses it in service of state power. It's giving Unhinged, darling. It's giving Howard Zinn on steroids. I mean, why they even blame Columbia University for the actions of Israel's military in the Gaza Strip is bizarre to me. I mean, I know they want them to totally divest from all things Israel, but that would make no difference to this conflict. And many of the things that people want them to divest from aren't directly related to this war, just Israeli companies and the like. So it's just a weird place to focus your ire on this university, which at least now, a couple years ago it wasn't, seems to be refocusing on its actual mission of learning rather than, caving to the demands of radical ideologues and protesters who try to take over places. Like, the audacity is wild. You think you get to rename a building that y'all don't own. Y'all don't have a claim to. No one gave you this power. And I'm sorry, but I just don't have it in me to have an ounce of sympathy for people who engage in this kind of radical illegal behavior and then catch a charge or get expelled. You played stupid games and you won stupid prizes. And it's kind of like the climate change debate where I think there are real concerns and real points to be made, but the same way that like throwing paint or soup on the Mona Lisa is not going to win people over to your side, you are only doing your side and your cause a tremendous disservice by advocating for it in this unhinged and illegal fashion. I agreed with this tweet from the writer Ben Appel. Everyone knows it's possible to support Palestinians without being absolute trash. But what's happening at Columbia is about so much more than Israel and Palestine. It's about destroying the US. I think there's a grain of truth to this. The anti-Israel radicals, the kind of people doing encampments and taking over buildings like this, they really have tied their cause to what seems like an opposition to all of Western civilization, to the very United States of America itself, even in many cases. And that's a mistake. If you just want to call for a ceasefire, if you want to advocate for civilians in Gaza who are being killed, all of that, you would be in such a better off place if you didn't lump it in with like the most radical left-wing anti-civilization ideology possible. Just a suggestion from me to you. Free advice. What do you guys think? Are you surprised to see this kind of chaos consume Columbia yet again? And are you pleased to see a very different reaction this time around? Do let me know in the comments and do hit that like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Oh, and guys, remember to send in some voice notes. The link is in the description with your woke horror stories, your personal situations and life experiences you want my advice or my input on. We've already gotten so many good ones, and I'm planning on recording an episode soon responding to them. Plus, don't forget to check out the Brad vs. Everyone merch line linked in the description. Okay, up next, we got to talk about another free speech story involving the Israel-Palestine conflict. What a gift that keeps on giving in terms of us consistent free speech defenders, because a anti-Israel and some would say anti-Semitic singer has had another concert canceled, this time under government pressure, because of her beliefs. This story comes out of New York, and the New York Times reports that a Kehlani concert in Central Park is canceled after pressure from Mayor. The singer, a vocal critic of Israel, had been scheduled to perform in June as a part of Pride festivities. 2 weeks ago, Cornell dropped a plan to have her headline a concert. So this singer had already been canceled from a Cornell University concert because of her controversial anti-Israel, or some say anti-Semitic views, but now she's being canceled from a public event in a public space, specifically at the behest of the New York City government. The Times reports the nonprofit group behind the Summer Stage concerts has canceled a scheduled Central Park performance by the popular R&B singer Kehlani under pressure from the administration of Mayor Eric Adams. The move came on Monday after a top New York City official warned the group, the City Parks Foundation, that its license to stage the long-running concert series could be at risk if it did not promptly take steps to address security concerns raised by the planned show. Billed as Pride with Kehlani, the concert was to take place on June 26th as part of the city's broader Pride festivities. It was the second scheduled Kehlani performance to be canceled in recent weeks amid a furor over the singer's pro-Palestinian stance. By the way, guys, this singer uses she/they pronouns, so a little bit of a red flag, but I won't be using the they pronouns. Trigger warning. The Times article continues that a spokeswoman for Mr. Adams, a Democrat, said in a statement that the administration was grateful to the City Parks Foundation for responding to our concerns and canceling the Kehlani concert in Central Park. We look forward to an exciting lineup of other performances this summer, the spokeswoman, Kayla Melomak Altus, added. The free expression group PEN America called the cancellation of the concert cowardly. It is deeply unsettling to see elected officials using their offices to dictate the bounds of acceptable expression and muscling private entities to fall into line, Jonathan Friedman, a managing director of the group, said in a statement. Now, at the heart of this is an allegation that this singer, Kehlani, who I'd never previously heard of, maybe she is a popular singer, but I guess I'm old and out of touch now, busted and crusted, but is she anti-Semitic? Is she just anti-Israel? Is she just pro-Palestine? Is she anti-Zionist? Or is she like a Jew hater? I don't know enough to answer that question. She denies being anti-Semitic. Obviously, almost anyone would. Here's a video of her addressing this point.
As I sit here and I'm working on my album, and I just so happen to be in the presence of my Jewish and Palestinian best friend and my Jewish engineer, I am being asked and called to clarify and make a statement yet again for the millionth time that I am not anti-Semitic nor anti-Jew. I am anti-genocide. I am anti the actions of the Israeli government. I am anti an extermination of an entire people. I'm anti the bombing of innocent children, men, women. That's what I'm anti.
But let's say for the sake of argument that her critics are correct and she is someone who could be fairly categorized as anti-Semitic. That actually doesn't matter to the broader question here, which is a basic matter of free speech principles. What's happened in this story is disturbing. No matter how you feel about the underlying issue, no matter how you feel about her take on it, it is not okay for government officials to use the power of their elected office to stifle and censor private institutions, pressure them to censor legal political speech that offends them. Doesn't matter if you think it's hateful, if it's hate speech, because listen, you could just as easily have a liberal mayor pressuring a local organization to shut down a public event for Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro or somebody who's transphobic or hateful. That speech is protected by the First Amendment. And as reprehensible as genuine anti-Semitism is, speech that is offensive about Jewish people or that is considered anti-Semitic is free speech. And we do not want the government using their elected office in this way. This is the exact kind of thing the Biden administration did under the Biden administration's censorship regime, where they would pressure private companies to take down posts that were, in some cases, accurate, like posts about the lab leak conspiracy theory that turned out to probably be true, that COVID came from a lab, but like memes and other things they didn't like, legal protected speech. The Biden administration pressured big tech companies to censor it. That is basically what Eric Adams is doing here, but this time against anti-Semitic speech. It's the same principle. It's wrong. It's inconsistent with support for free speech and the First Amendment. It would be a different story, a little bit more debatable situation, if this was a private organization at a private space with no involvement from the government whatsoever, deciding to stop her concert because of her opinions. That's a different situation. But when you're talking about a public venue, them hosting a speaker or a singer, same thing in this case, because of their views, and then the government pressures them to shut them down with bogus security concerns, that is censorship. That is not something you can support if you believe in free speech and the First Amendment and an open debate and exchange of ideas. And let's be clear, like, this argument about security concerns is always a smokescreen, because if there are genuine security concerns posed by her performance, the answer is to provide more police resources to make sure it can happen, not to cave to a heckler's veto. That's what it is. If you say, oh, well, we're not censoring you because of your opinion, there's just a lot of security concerns or there's a lot of threats, then what you're saying is that any speaker can be shut down if their opponents just get loud enough and get angry enough. That is completely inconsistent with freedom of expression. And I do really believe that there is quite a number of prominent free speech warriors on the right wing in America who built their brand around supporting dangerous ideas and open expression and free speech at all costs, who are conspicuously silent or even outright supportive of efforts to crack down on anti-Israel speech. I believe Israel has every right to exist. I believe it has every right to defend itself. But I also think free speech is a human right. The First Amendment is arguably one of the most important parts of our Constitution, and there is no Israel exception to it, as much as some right-wing commentators seem to believe otherwise. I found this tweet from Nico Perino of the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which, disclaimer, I do a little bit of freelance work for. I found this tweet thread from him really, I think, spot on. He wrote, "Do we actually believe in free speech? Do we actually believe controversial speakers have a right to speak in America, free from government censorship? For the past decade, I stood along conservatives who loudly and justifiably protested when speakers like Ben Shapiro and Charles Murray were prevented from speaking on college campuses, often under the guise of vague appeals to safety. Will those same voices rise up now that the boot is on the other foot? Do we actually believe in free speech as a principle, or merely as an expedient argument when our side is censored? Do we actually oppose cancel culture? Do we actually oppose the heckler's veto? Do we actually oppose vague security rationales for censorship? I will work with anyone to defend free speech in any scenario, even if doing so means those same people, whether they are the canceled conservatives of the past or the canceled left-wingers of the present, will sometimes abandon free speech when it's their side doing the censorship. Believing in free speech is as simple as the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. I completely agree with Nico here, and this is not a paid ad, but this is why I highly recommend you go and donate and support and become a paying member to FIRE. They're the only ones who consistently defend free speech, whether it's the left or the right, who stick their neck out on this. And trust me, it's not easy. It's very hard in such a hyper-partisan political moment, so please do support them if you can. And in cases like this, we need to be able to set aside our feelings on the actual issue and stand by these basic issues and principles of free speech and the First Amendment. That's my take on it, but let me know what you think in the comments. Up next, we got to talk about Canada, because this is beyond parody. There's a really sad story playing out in Canada right now where 2 kids have gone missing, and obviously the police are involved. It's become a national story. I don't know a whole lot about the case, but my heart goes out to the family. I hope the kids are brought home and found safe and sound. But we have to talk about this moment because the police obviously are involved and are having a press conference to discuss this case, and here's how they began.
Good afternoon. I am Corporal Carly McCann, Provincial Public Information Officer for the Nova Scotia RCMP. Thank you all for being here today. First, I acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years.
Are we serious? Are we so for real right now? First off, I don't even know what half of that means. I mean, you're just babbling nonsense. But 2 children are missing, and you think the priority, first things first, is to open up with some virtue signaling about Native Americans. That is cringeworthy in any context. These land acknowledgements are stupid. As far as I'm concerned, give it back or shut up. This virtue signaling does nothing to help actual indigenous or native people who have real problems. It's just like our heart goes out to you for everything bad that happened to you. We're not willing to sacrifice or do anything whatsoever, but we acknowledge your pain. If anything, that's a slap in the face. And in many cases, it is pointless and cringe. In the case of kids actively being missing, and you're opening up the police press conference with this, that is absurd and beyond parody. And it's why people hate woke things. It's why people find wokeness and progressivism insufferable. It's this kind of stuff. To be crystal clear, I don't necessarily blame the woman in this video. There are probably rules, regulations, or even laws that require her to do this. And she's reading from a script. She's doing her job. She probably went into policing because she wants to, help in these kinds of situations, like when kids are missing. And this is just what she has to grit her teeth and do. Maybe she's woke, maybe she supports it, but maybe she's not. And I don't want to throw too much shade at her personally, because again, this is probably a policy or a law that she is complying with, not something she is choosing to insert into this investigation. Because, even a woke person with an ounce of common sense would not choose to do this at all, but especially first, at the beginning of the press conference about the missing kids. Yeah, we'll get to those kids, but who are missing, the 4-year-old, the 6-year-old. But first, we got to do some virtue signaling. I can't believe anyone would choose to do that. So I am going to give her the grace that she probably had no choice. She's probably forced to. Maybe she could have refused, but don't beat up on her too much. But Canada, are y'all okay? I know you like to throw shade at us, and I understand we have our problems. We're a hot mess in many ways, but at least we're not this bad. At least we're not this bad. All right, everybody. That'll be it for this episode of the Barad versus Everyone podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. If you're listening to us on audio podcast, do rate and review. And make sure to send me a voice note with your woke horror stories, your personal life situations you want advice on, or anything else. And check out the merch in the description. And we'll talk again real soon.